Okay, and we are live. Hi, good afternoon. Hello, hello. This is Daniel Cervantes with Next Up Asia. Today I have Mr. Bobby Liu from, well, I would say from Singapore, but he's actually not based in Singapore. He's actually based in Vietnam. So, hey, welcome, Bobby, welcome on the show.
Hello, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Bobby, how long have you been in Vietnam, and like, how did you end up going to Vietnam?
How long is your broadcast?
We got an hour, but yeah, let's go with the short one. Oh,
Okay, short version was I came to Vietnam about 20 years ago
Mhm.
on the invitation by a friend to play golf. And
I'm not going to ask you to play golf anymore.
yeah, and I never left. But then I was, sort of commuting for the first 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only the last 10, 12 years that I'm kind of full-time in Vietnam, in Hanoi.
Mm-hmm. And what make you wanted to actually like stay here and try to like be based in Vietnam?
Okay, so at that time, I was living in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And then I left New York and worked 2 years in Papua New Guinea. That's where I met some friends, golfing friends. And one of them got transferred to Vietnam. So that's how I came to visit him before flying back to the US. And then when I came here, I realized that, Vietnam, or Asia was where I should be instead of the US. Retrospectively, I think I made the right decision.
And so looking at Vietnam has like it's actually a very interesting market as well, it's like over 90 million people, 50% are connected online, and that number is growing rapidly. Like, can you share a bit on the like how is the general ecosystem over there, and also like since we are in terms of the whole COVID situation, how has that affected so far?
Oh, okay. Which one should I answer first?
Let's go with COVID. Let's get that out of the way. Yeah.
Okay. I think in general, the government has done a great job in preventing the spread. To date, according to some official status and statistics, we have less than 300 cases tested with infection, and more than 200 actually so far have recovered. And there has no cases at all for the last 5 days. So we are hoping that this will continue on. I think one of the reasons, and there was some press writing about that. So I think one of the reasons is that Vietnam was early in terms of curbing the inflow of tourists. In fact, it was the first country, I believe, in Southeast Asia that sort of banned flights from China.
Okay.
And that was right during the Lunar New Year period. So very early on, they have already, sort of implemented certain measures to curb the spread. And in fact, it was even right up to early March, there was probably 50 plus cases. And then somebody came back from Vietnam, from Europe to Vietnam.
Okay.
And then a lot of returnees, people who because of the Lunar New Year period, a lot of people left, and then they came back after that, and that sort of created that little bit of a second wave, so to speak. The spike up to today, about 260 plus cases, and then, like I said, more than 200 have recovered. So thank God, that's a good thing. And the other thing also, I think what Vietnam did wasn't really to curb the spread. It's more of preempting the virus, because Vietnam was affected twice, right, with such cases of coronaviruses. One was 2003 SARS, and then around maybe 5 years ago there was this bird flu thing going on, which also Vietnam managed to sort of curb the spread. So I think so Vietnam has a lot of practice in terms of that, and they've been pretty diligent in terms of the prevention factor rather than the reactive manner.
How is the situation over there in terms of like daily life? Like, is there you mentioned social distancing, but is there like any official lockdown, any things by the government or so on?
Yeah, we did. So because of early March, the spike. So basically, we have a similar thing like Malaysia, MCO, right? Over here, we call it the lockdown. And so very strict social distancing, where you cannot gather with more than 2 people. You got to walk, 2 meters apart from each other. And that started, of all time, 1st April. So we're like, is that a joke? But then, so it wasn't a joke. So there was a lockdown that started 1st April. It was supposed to end last week, 15 April, but then they extended 1 more week, and supposedly today is the last day. So we haven't heard anything whether if they're going to extend it. For me, so what happened was from 1st April onwards, all restaurants closed, all non-essential shops closed, only grocery shops and convenience shops are open. And up to today, it's the same thing. So I don't know if they're going to extend it, given that there's a big holiday coming up end of this month, the Reunification Day and May Day holiday, 2 days. Yep. So I don't know if they're considering that as sort of a potential flashpoint. Yeah. If they do, probably it's going to be extended. But if they feel that the situation is under control, then probably today will be the last day. So keeping my finger crossed.
And so, in terms of how has that affected the whole startup ecosystem over there? Like, what are the big changes you notice?
Changes. So obviously there are less activities, just like everywhere else in Southeast Asia. But I think by and large, most of the startups here are still very kind of hyper local, right? And not too many of them are sort of, that have expanded or scaled outside of Southeast Asia. You have maybe 3 or 5. So in general, there are e-commerce is still doing well. Tiki, Sando, they're selling like crazy. Personally, I've never used Tiki until the last 2 weeks, which I used 3 times. So it's getting people to using online. I think e-payment, for example, e-wallets and all that stuff, those are doing quite well. So people are really sort of gravitating towards e-payment. Ride hailing, for example, like Grab, B, for example, they are still delivering, but there's no passenger rides for the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Yep. So I don't know if that's going to happen tomorrow, assuming if today is the last day. What else? So the travel industry is obviously taking a hit, just like everywhere else, because I've got a couple portfolio companies in travel, and they are like basically running at zero. Have we seen any kind of, I don't know, I mean, on social media, I've not really seen the kind of panic situation happening. I think one of the reasons also probably the overheads, the cost of running a business in Vietnam is probably cheaper. I know that a lot of people that used to work at co-working spaces are now working from home. So this working from home thing is real. For example, at Topica, we have more than 400 people. 95% of them are working from home. So we are operating on different platforms, so on and so forth. I've been doing, a whole lot of conference call working, and video conferencing and so on and so forth. I think the impact is definitely there. In terms of the management, maybe because of if startups are relying on businesses from outside of Vietnam, yes, I think they're probably suffering quite a bit. The obvious absence of travel is also affecting in terms of VCs looking into startups for investment. But I think they are sort of moving towards the online platform, and for example, there's like KK Fund, for example, they a couple of weeks ago they organized this thing called Meet Your Match.
Yes.
And I hear the responses have been fantastic, with more than 600 startups in 6-7 different countries, and more than 150 VCs that have participated in this event. So it'll be quite interesting to see how VCs are using online and pulling the trigger.
I do not know whether there been any investment, but I know KK Fund has been also working with the likes of MDEC over in Malaysia to conduct
Exactly.
that. Yeah, and like 600 over like startups actually applying for it is actually crazy a lot.
Yeah. Malaysia has more than 150.
Yes.
Alone. So so it'll be interesting, and from the beginning of this pandemic period, especially when travel started getting reduced, from that time until now, I've spoken to some VCs. So basically, you see some changes in opinions. So during the beginning of the pandemic, right, the general consensus is that any new funding will be done after, thinking that probably it's going to end early. But then looking at how things are going on in Southeast Asia, probably this the absence of travel is going to continue for a while. And if that really happens, then I think VC will have to relook at how they do due diligence, in order to make an investment. There are also talks that it's a buyer's market, and then of course I've done a couple of shows with some VCs. We did talk about the subject of valuation. By and large, I think most of the people that I've spoken to, have also expressed that this is not the time to sort of press down valuation. So let's hope that's true. But at the same time, this is a period of time where they're going to look at the startups and say that, hey, are you guys doing something that is so-called pandemic proof or recession proof? Is there more value out of that? Is it something that you're able to withstand a downturn, for example, regardless of what situation, right? So I think prior to this whole pandemic thing, there was a little bit of a FOMO going on, I think. But with this, I think this FOMO attitude is tempered. And in the long run, if you look at Southeast Asia as a whole, I think a lot of I think startups is going to look at it and say, all right, really, am I building a startup, or am I building a real business? So I think that's critical.
Yeah, there's a lot of change happening over in Malaysia. There's also a lot of startups that have been pivoting. So I think grocery or food delivery has been one of the few big pivots. The example that I always bring up is the unicorn Klook from Hong Kong going into groceries, which is like really crazy because they are a travel startup that got into groceries. Any big pivots that are happening within the Vietnam ecosystem?
In Vietnam, actually, no. I mean, maybe they are, but not big enough whereby it becomes like what Klook is doing from a completely different vertical to another vertical, right? Maybe I would say the extent, I would not call it a pivot, but rather more of getting them to survive and doing something else or adding more services, especially if what they're building is complementary to what the new things. What I've heard basically is that this period of time actually allows startups to rethink how they onboard customers. How to find different revenue streams, for example, right? where I mean, I think a lot of times we tend to onboard customers, taking advantage, taking for granted the face-to-face type of meetups, right? Visiting your clients and all that stuff. But I've heard of some startups that actually have totally moved from that to online, and they're showing results. Depending on what you're selling or who you're selling to, I think in terms of what startups are doing, there's no reason why they can't actually onboard online. All right, unless you're providing services to offline clients, right? So that probably is affected. But other than that, if you are offering a SaaS platform, for example, like a B2B, I think a lot of them have really gone full on into trying to onboard online.
So I'd like to just quickly just say welcome to a bunch of people that are watching. Brian Pereira, Alvin Quay from Penang actually mentioned this. Very stylo, brother. Melissa Tan, who is actually we are getting on Friday to talk about how to be eco during this whole MCO, because I think one of the things that you see a lot of food delivery service, and we are using a lot of plastic over here. So thank you all for watching. If you guys have any question, feel free to ask Bobby. Just drop in the comment and we will take your question. But if not, let's look at some key trends. Like, what do you think will be different actually after whole COVID-19 in terms of the companies that are in Vietnam? Would they still follow business as usual pre-COVID, or there is going to be a lot more shift, like when you mentioned onboarding customers and all those other stuff? And even the trend of working from home.
Okay, I think the trend working from home may continue. Obviously, not in such a drastic manner. Probably you're looking at I don't know, randomly. I think companies are more comfortable, especially Vietnam, whereby maybe they will allow the staff to work from home, let's say at least 1 day a week, right? What will be interesting is that if this working from home is does not affect efficiency in terms of work delivery, then I think a lot of commercial properties will suffer. Okay, a lot of startups use co-working spaces. Yes. Okay, I don't know how that's going to evolve, and then you certainly don't need, for example, you may not need 100 seats. Maybe you just need 50 seats because it's rotational, for example, right? So that part would be interesting. So I think that's more of a social, change.
Social shift.
And in terms of like other verticals and all that stuff, I mean, it's kind of So Edtech, online education, is obviously something big. And I think in the long run we're going to see a big change in that, even for schools, right? How are offline schools going to look at delivering education and combining with online? Do you still need to, or rather the educators, the teachers, do they still need to go through the same boring lectures or classes? What can they do to make it the offline part to be really interesting, and then the more one-to-one homework, group work, moving to online, right? Then of course, if that were to happen, then as parents, how do you handle that when you have kids, home more often than before? So education, I see a continuing change. Healthcare, we already see that happening. One of my portfolio companies is doing a lot of online, even though it's got a physical clinic, and we are seeing a lot more online onboarding, and to the point whereby we were able to build clienteles, even from outside of Vietnam. All right, so that's a cool thing. So it's proven again, online like e-commerce and all that will thrive. And then it'll be interesting to see if they're going to expand into different things, right? So you might have like currently you have, for example, Shopee, Tiki doing simply consumer goods.
Yes.
Are they going to go into grocery? Who knows, right? In the end, they're just a platform, for buyers and sellers, right? How are they going to onboard that? What else? I think, at least in the short term, investors. Okay, so pre-pandemic, travel industry was supposed to be really hot. It was estimated to be double digits billion or triple digit billion market potential. Given this period of time, so you see like from that to almost zero, right?
Yeah.
Hotels are obviously affected. All the hotels are closed here, by the way. So travel business will take a beating. I think they're gonna start building almost like from scratch, right? The trust. But at the same time, you may have Agoda to be such a big platform, and they're completely, affected like everyone else, big or small. Now, maybe this is a good opportunity to relook at the travel industry and see, what else can be done that, and using this period, as a lesson to see what they can do to sort of creating a more robust type of travel verticals.
So so go ahead.
But I think B2B SaaS will be very, very strong.
Yeah. Can you explain in terms of B2B SaaS? Actually, it's like some of the companies that have come out of Vietnam. Because I was going to ask you about the business outsourcing part, which is, I think 2015 was actually primed to be one of the biggest growth sector for the Vietnam IT industry. So the BPO back office and also the IT outsourcing. So yeah, I think in recent years, there's a lot more B2B SaaS coming out from Vietnam.
Yep. Okay, so if you talk about the BPO sector, right, I think there's still quite, as far as I understand, right, I think they're still quite hyper local, providing SaaS services to local companies, right? I think for you to do for example, a payroll or tax platform, in Southeast Asia, it's a bit tricky, right? Yes. I mean, in the US, you have maybe 3 levels of tax structure, right? Federal, state, city, and they're more or less the same. But in Southeast Asia, it's completely different, right? So it's kind of hard to sort of, adopt that over. Even if you look at ride hailing, for example, Grab, it's in so many countries in Southeast Asia, but every country, the operation is very different, right? So I think that's a, geographically is a huge barrier, right? But nonetheless, if you look at from a local standpoint, whether it's Malaysia or whether it's in Vietnam or Singapore, for example, you're going to see a lot of SMEs, in order to sort of switch over to a digital platform. So instead of spending all the money to try and build, right, then they probably will outsource a lot of services to companies that provide it. It could be cloud platform, for example, integration of cloud platform. It could be payroll, so on and so forth, whereby it actually help ease the fact that you're able to travel and work from either working from home or working remotely, and you're still having a central platform to assist internally to what you're doing.
Dave Chu actually asked, like, what do you think makes the local government there change their comfort in supporting fintech startup recently than earlier?
Actually, so we're talking about Vietnam, right?
Yes.
Okay. No, I think there has been a great support for fintech. And by extension, there's been great support of the IT or startup ecosystem and it's probably, outside of Vietnam, people perceive as, a recent thing. And I think this is probably perpetuated by the fact that, a couple of the fintech guys got, pretty huge funding like Momo and VMPay, right? But in total, I mean, if I remember correctly, in Vietnam alone, there are easily 30 over e-wallets,
Wow.
of one form or another, right? So everyone is just trying to, fight that. So it's not just a recent thing, right? I think it's just recently it got in the news. But I think in terms of fintech, it's been going on for as long as maybe even Malaysia or I mean the trend line is pretty similar across Southeast Asia. So yeah, and then of course you see this proliferation of fintech, for example, in the last few years, right? Anywhere from in blockchain, in crypto, different types. I would like to see actually more, and not just about the wallet, but more fintech type of. It could be a B2B thing, for example, but rather than just simply, one thing within that fintech.
Yeah. And the word fintech is also a big area. So
yes,
Dave that asked that question is running, I think it's a peer-to-peer home loan platform
right.
that is funded by Mox. So so that is something perhaps that like some of the local Malaysian companies can look at entering Vietnam. So let's go into that actually. Let's figure out like how can some of the companies outside of Vietnam enter? And what should they look out for?
Okay, so if we don't keep to fintech, let's talk about in general, right? And this is an interesting point that I've always discussed and talked about, right? So in Malaysia, for example, you have some really great startups, right? And they are lauded for being a startup, right? They get this so-called superstar status, whatever. But when they come to Vietnam, it's a business. It's no longer a startup. Nobody's going to look at you and say, "Oh yeah, I'm giving you this, leeway because you are a startup." You're a business, as far as the government is concerned, because you're not getting any kind of benefits, by being called a startup. And this is true for all the countries, right? No matter. So, basically, all right, so take, for example, Topica, right? Managed to build such a big, Edtech company. And obviously, my colleagues and all that stuff, get invited to speak on Edtech, right? But as soon as we move into Thailand or Indonesia, we are treated as a business. We still pay the same tax like any businesses, labor law and everything else, right? So there's really very little advantage in that sense, for Southeast Asia. So you really got to look at it and say, you better build a strong business before you want to go somewhere else, right? And in that sense, it's in Southeast Asia is it's much smaller as compared to, let's say, if I were a startup in Silicon Valley and I go to New York, I'm still within the same geographic area, right?
Yes.
So coming to Vietnam, okay, you got to start thinking yourself as a business. Okay, registration. Do you want to get a local partner? Do you want to set up a local entity, or do you want to basically just do a sort of like a rep office, whereby it's more service provision to your clients, right? So a lot of companies are doing that as well. You got to look at yourself, as far as Vietnam is concerned, you got to look at yourself as a business when you come here. Who are you hiring? Are you hiring a lot of people? And if you hire the locals, then obviously you are subject to the labor law, right? Are the locals going to look at you and say that, hey, I'm working for a startup? No, they're working for a salary, right? With the exception of, I don't know, maybe, bigger companies like Grab, for example, or Uber previously, right? or let's say Slack or Google, right? Then there's a certain level of clout, these companies provide. Other than that, everything else, anything under the 1%, if you come to Vietnam, you're just a company hiring staff. So you got to have that, it's a stark reality. It's not sexy at all, and it may even sound negative, but it's not. That's the reality.
Yeah.
And this goes across the board, and I could go to Malaysia, KL, to open an office, and I hire people. They're not going to look at me and say, "Oh wow, I'm working for Bobby startup." No, I'm going to work for this company, and this company better pay me the salary. And since you're a foreign company, you should pay me more. That would be the general consensus, right?
Dave, sorry, just to correct myself, it's not MOX, it's China Accelerator that Dave got funded. He have a follow-up question. Would you encourage to partner with a local founder or hire local talent?
Interesting. Give me a few seconds to digest this. Should you encourage to partner with a local founder? In what sense?
I think
do you already have a startup, or are you thinking of coming to Vietnam to build?
So the company already exists. They are in Malaysia. They've been to China Accelerator. In September. So so they're looking for expansion. So
okay. For expansion, are they looking to Vietnam expansion from a sales standpoint, or are they looking for expansion from a talent standpoint? Right. So if you're expanding from a sales standpoint, so there are one of two ways. Okay. One would be incorporate in Vietnam as a branch of Malaysia, and operate just like whatever. From Malaysia, you have Berjaya, you have Gamuda, for example, right? And operating that. Okay. And then you hire your team, locally to run your local business. Right, because there's a lot of local knowledge and local implementation that you need to have. But if or second way is to find a sort of a distributor, for example, especially if we are selling physical products, right, or SaaS even, for example, then you find a local distributor to distribute your products. Then it's going to be an arm's length of principal and distributor. Okay. The other way would be I mentioned that already. Okay. So yes, or if it's something that is more sensitive, then you probably want to have a sort of a local partner as a founder to doing it. Right. I believe in the early days you have Garena Vietnam and then Garena Singapore, and then they kind of merged, into one. So that's something that you may want to consider. For example, I think So you may want to think about that. But typically, I would really look at maybe if it's on sales base, appoint someone. And if you are big enough, obviously you do it on your own, with customer service support and all that stuff. Otherwise, I don't think you really need to come in here, especially if it's one-off, ad hoc, looking for expansion. But if you're just building the talent here, right, then you may want to actually look at some outsourcing, to help you with that. And then if you build a team, then typically they'll be working remotely. And then you got to look at, salary structure and all that stuff.
What is, in terms of Vietnam is fairly interesting in terms of the whole country. I know different cities have like different niches and so on. Like where can you just explain a bit? I feel what happens within the field, like between Ho Chi Minh, Hanoi, Da Nang, and like what are they known for?
Okay, so in very general sense, right? Ho Chi Minh City has always been known as the commercial hub. From even the early days when Vietnam opened up. Hanoi is probably known more for diplomatic and government, right? Policy making, for example. So if if I have to make some kind of a differentiation so that at least the audience or listeners have some idea. If you are doing something that is more consumer facing, right? Especially you have a lot of contact with your consumers, right? A B2C business. I would say Ho Chi Minh would be a better place, right? If you're doing a B2B, for example, probably Hanoi is much better in terms of implementation. If you're doing, let's say, fintech as a base, so you have your base, let's say your local base, I would say do it in Hanoi so that you're closer to this, for example, the authorities. Your actual, commercial activities can be in Ho Chi Minh City. So, it's both, a blessing and a curse that Vietnam has two very strong cities, for startup ecosystem, right? I mean, obviously the blessing is that we have two cities, both are vibrant and both, have very good talents. Then of course the curse is that, which one do you go to and unlike other
set up both actually.
Yeah. So unlike, other Southeast Asian countries, you probably have one, dominant city, there's a hub. And then of course we have Da Nang coming up, which everyone says that, is more tourist related. Although, I think Da Nang and Nha Trang right now is kind of empty.
Pretty much. But I also know a lot of developers who are taking on US clients that are all based in Da Nang. So Da Nang has a very interesting talent pool for software developers. I think a lot of Python developers, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, it's like, I don't know. I mean, at least for me, if you're in Da Nang, if you have a good job and your work, has no relation to, where you are, why would you want to leave Da Nang? Da Nang is beautiful, right? I mean, 5 minutes after the beach, 10 minutes after the airport, 20 minutes into, Hoi An. So, yeah. So I'm representing Da Nang tourism. I'm kidding.
JP Yo say internet connection at breakneck speed.
Generally, we do have very decent speed. I wouldn't call it breakneck speed. But on a regular basis, we do have. I think somehow around around Vietnam, I think we have a special shark that always bite onto the cable. So every couple of months, we have sort of a disruption, not total disruption, but some disruption. And then it's always attributed to the sharks. So I think there's a new breed of sharks that always go for cables. I don't know why.
Well, one of the person that commented earlier, Johnson Lam, if there's any issue with cable, look for this guy. I look for Johnson Lam. Johnson, say hi.
Okay. Hello.
So because I also one of the things, there's a lot of undersea cable that connects from Vietnam to the States. So it actually ranges from there. So that's actually a very good point to do that.
But I think in general, let's say, the sharks are not hungry, not biting onto the cable. I think in terms of the speed, it's fairly decent. It's as good as probably for your normal use. I got no problem, for example, with my Netflix video, for example. So it's obviously very different and much improved from even 5 years ago. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So without any kind of physical external interruption, the internet speed here is good for most things. I would say 99%.
Yeah, it's actually quite good place to be. That's why I think that's why you're there for a while and you enjoyed it. Yeah. So the other thing you actually been doing a bunch of interviews and so on. Like what's going on? How can people find you?
Okay. So I mean, look, you're doing a lot more than I have, right? You, Hazlake, a couple other guys. You guys are doing more regularly than I do. If okay, first of all, I learned of the platform through you, right? Because you were testing out something, and I found out, right? I think you and Maverick, for example. If
Yeah.
Maverick is listening, hello, Botak. So so I started tinkering with it, and I thought, hey, this is interesting, and it was something that, okay, 6 months ago, I bought a whole bunch of mics, microphone, camera stand and all that stuff, thinking that, hey, maybe, I'll try some, podcasts, right? Never did. Okay. I did not do anything. It was still, it's still in boxes. I even bought a Bluetooth wireless microphone, right?
Wow.
Never touched it. Yeah.
That's
Thinking that I was going to do it, right? So
serious.
this period of time actually got me to, basically, you can't do much, right? I'm home for the most part. So after seeing what you've done, and I play around with, the platform that we are using now, and I realized that, hey, this is interesting. So I did one with a friend who came back and then was quarantined for 2 weeks, not because she had the COVID, but then that was by law, right? Anybody coming back, right? So I did one with her, and it went, without a hitch. Did a second one with Lau Chehan and a couple others, and yeah. So basically, look, it wasn't planned. It wasn't something that it was, a studied approach, right? So I said, okay, you're talking about something, so it's crucial. So I call it crucial talking points.
Nice.
So it's very ad hoc. It was not really, thought out, and it's just something that, initially started off as to fill up time. But and after I've done like maybe 6, I think so far I've done 6. I'm getting really, really good, encouragement from people. So I'll probably continue on, but then I've got to find topics to talk, right? I mean, I can't call it crucial talking points and then I talk about nonsense.
This came out of this particular stream came out of the fact when we got started with MCO, and the whole point is there was a lot of companies and startups and entrepreneurs in Malaysia are going through a very, very down, and so we decided to invite people to share stuff that they can look as opportunities, look at room to grow, look at how to be resilient and survive. So again, this is also built out from a series of experimentation happened. Yeah, but
I mean, it's great. Look, I did follow, some of your podcasts, and then I got idea of, to doing that. I mean, what you're doing, what Maverick is doing is fantastic, right? And is really helping people who are, either, struggling before, or especially struggling now, and, trying to find new ways of, doing things. So yeah, I think, whether this thing were to prolong or is over, I think we should continue on. I think we are getting more and more comfortable, with online broadcast, online communication, and we just need to basically find a better way of doing it to be more effective. Hopefully, we don't get for example, podcast fatigue, right?
I did.
Or conference.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So online, online conferencing fatigue, stuff like this. And this is interesting because now I think, we have discovered a few other platforms that you can even hold virtual conferences, where they have the avatar, they have the 3D, AR and all that stuff. Of course, I don't think that's going to be as effective. If this thing were to prolong, then if things were to happen, for example, if Meet the Match, attains the kind of success that they want to have, meaning to say that investment flows can still be done with online. I'm wondering what happened to all the offline events. right?
Yeah.
Because that used to be that, very platform whereby startups will connect to investors. And if you don't need that, then what's going to happen, right? So not to say that all these, offline platforms will disappear, but I think, the onus now is on organizers to creating, a much higher value, platform, so that people find it worthwhile to travel, if you live in different countries, or even to attend the event.
I
So
think
yeah, it'll be big change.
I think that will still probably continue because at the end of the day, a lot of them still want to travel and and meet people. It's fun hanging out with you online, but it's always more fun hanging out with you in
No,
person.
correct, exactly. So would you be attending every month, for example, like what
Yeah.
happened before, right? Or would you look at it and go like, okay, I'm going to attend 3 because these are the 3 top ones,
Mhm.
and it's got, not just the content, but there's it's more purposeful,
Yes.
right? So yeah, I'm talking from that
Okay. Yeah.
line of
Definitely.
reasoning, right? You cannot replace face to face.
Mhm.
It's different, having coffee with you at a cafe than having coffee now with you, right? But for such events, I think it's going to be much higher value, right? The expectation is going to be up there. Um, and so basically any kind of offline event, you really just got to bump it up.
Yeah, definitely. I think that will be something very different as soon as we come out from this. And yeah, on that note, looking forward to see you in person in one of this real life
Yes.
physical event. The last time
Yeah.
I saw you was in January.
Base, was it? Yeah, base. It was in.
Hey,
So I was lucky enough to attend that. Because right after that everything just got shut down. So it was
yeah.
good that we were able. I mean, we didn't talk much, but it was good that we
No, no, because
managed to catch up.
I hurt
Yeah.
my leg, so I didn't want to talk to anyone. It
Right.
was painful.
Hmm.
But that's the beauty of doing stuff virtual. I don't need to go and accidentally hurt my leg.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Bobby. Thanks for actually coming on. It was very insightful. What are the social media channels people should actually look out to connect with you, and where can they find out about more what you do?
Well, basically, my main social channel is Facebook,
Mhm.
right? Look me up, Bobby Liu, or you can go to my page, Bobby Ty Liu. That's pretty much it. Or some of you may find me on LinkedIn, although I don't use that as a communication platform much. I will add
Yeah.
you, but seldom I would, yeah, respond. I think most of the guys in Malaysia are in the Unicroach group,
Yeah.
WhatsApp group, the SaaS founder group.
Mm.
So I'm on those, so they can communicate with me through that. What else? And then I'm also in a couple of the VC groups as well, if any VCs are listening. Yeah, so mainly will be through Facebook. That's my that's my yellow pages.
That's the yellow pages. Speaking of the Uniroach group, our big brother Jonathan Lee will be on tomorrow at 11
Oh,
a.m.
okay.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
John just have a new role, country manager of country manager of Rice actually. So that is like something very interesting. He'll be talking about corporate innovation. So that will be happen at 11 a.m. Malaysian time. So plus 8
Okay.
GMT plus 8. So that will be very interesting. And then we have Victor from Vin Capital at 2 p.m. tomorrow, and Melissa, as I mentioned earlier, that will be 10 a.m. on Friday, and on Saturday morning, 7 a.m. is the legendary Noah Kagan of AppSumo. So
7 a.m. Malaysia
yeah,
time.
Malaysia time. Unfortunately, because we
Yeah,
so
yeah. He's in the US, right?
yeah, he's in Austin, which is very weird to actually fit a nice time. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
so we'll be there, and then the startup weekend happening over there. So hey, are you involved in the Malaysian startup weekend by any chance? I think
No.
Malcolm reached out to you. Did he not? Okay, never mind.
Who?
Well, never mind. I
Who?
will message you later privately on that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
so
Thank you. Yeah.
thank you very much. I'll see you soon. Take care, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. All right.
Yeah,
And
stay
bye to
safe.
everyone. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.